Well, hello there.
Hello.
Friends, lovers, welcome. It's Sunday. It's 6 o'clock Eastern. You know what that means. This is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. I am Robert Nasir. I am joined, as always, by the lovely, gracious, drop-dead gorgeous Amy Nasir.
My name is Amy. It is.
And we're glad you are joining us, too.
Yes.
Oh, my pillow's out of place here. Halloween is right around the corner.
Yay, spooky
We'll get to
season.
that, but first, Sunday, October 17th, 2021, today, the 290th day of this year, your best year yet. 75 days left to make it so. 75 days, 2.5 months.
All right, get on it.
Get on that thing. 69 days until Christmas, and just 2 weeks to the day, 14 days until All Hallows Eve. That's how we've got to make sure our Halloween decorations, actually our front lawn is only halfway there. 2 weeks left to get that done. If you're running behind too, you're on our team. You're on Team Nasir. Thank you for that. And this is a very, very, very special day.
It is.
Let me tell you why. Let's talk about that.
Can I talk about the first one?
You can talk about well, I don't know. Depends on what the first one is.
I just want to say happy birthday to my love Robert, who's
Oh.
sitting next to me. Although it was actually yesterday, so it's his birthday plus a day. So happy birthday.
Yes.
Did you have a nice day?
Well, we'll get to that. But yes. And folks are in the chat. That is what I want to see. That is my birthday present. You don't have to say happy birthday to me. Just show up. Let us know what's on your mind, because we've got things to talk about on this day, on this happy day, October 17th, 1931, 90 years ago to the day. Al Capone goes to prison. And why is that a happy thing? Well, we've got to talk about that. Al Capone goes to prison October 17th, 1931, sentenced to 11 years in prison for tax evasion, and fined $80,000, signaling the downfall of one of the most notorious criminals of the 1920s and 1930s. Among Capone's enemies was federal agent Elliot Ness, who led a team of officers known as the Untouchables because they could not be corrupted. Ness and his men routinely broke up Capone's bootlegging businesses, but it was tax evasion charges that finally stuck and landed Capone in prison in 1931. Now, I'm going to stop there for now, because, by contrast, on this date, this same date, October 17th, in 1974, the film Benji opened in movie theaters.
That's very sweet.
Why?
I remember Benji.
Why would we go from Al Capone to Benji? Benji, a film about a stray dog who helps rescue several kidnapped children, opens in theaters. It went on to become a family classic. Written and directed by Joe Camp, Benji starred a mutt named Higgins, who had been rescued as a puppy from a California animal shelter. This is the dog that went on to appear in the 1960s television series Petticoat Junction, the 1971 movie Mooch Goes to Hollywood with Zsa Zsa Gabor. Benji was a commercial hit, spawned a series of TV movies, follow-up features, For the Love of Benji, Oh Heavenly Dog, Benji the Hunted. I didn't actually see all of them, but I remember Oh Heavenly Dog with Chevy Chase and Jane Seymour. It wasn't a great movie, but it was great fun. Benji. Why do I contrast Al Capone and Benji? Well, that's our topic for today, the day after my birthday. See, I remember the 70s. Some of you don't. You didn't metaphysically exist at that time.
Sort of remember it.
Yes. Well, you were born in the 70s. So in the 70s, we had movies like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. With those names, they sound like the good guys, but they weren't. Or we had films like Bonnie and Clyde, with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. This would have been just after A Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick. We had films that glamorized the bad guys, the Al Capones. And what would happen is, I was young, I was a kid. Some of these I saw after, years later, but I'm a kid going to see these movies, and you see this, hour and a half movie of these bad guys having the time of their life. They put, they put a little time into why they became bad guys. Sometimes it was unfortunate things in their childhood. Think about the recent film Joker, about the Joker. They explain the origins of these bad guys. How could this terrible person have come out to be so terrible? And then you get, again, almost all of the 90 minutes is showing how exciting their criminal career was. And in the case of Bonnie and Clyde, how much fun it was. You even had music to go with it to make it charming. And then, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or Bonnie and Clyde, you did have that 2.5 minutes or 5 minutes at the very end where these people who are terrible people, but now they're your heroes, you're identifying with them, get all shot up at the end or, meet their demise in some way. What you usually didn't get at the end of these kinds of movies was the bad guys meet their demise over the course of years and years and years, and yet that's what happens in real life. The Benjis go on to have great movie careers and be the happiest puppies in Hollywood. Al Capone got out of prison in 1939 for good behavior. I mean, he's Al Capone. What's he going to do in prison? After spending his final year in prison, in the prison hospital, suffering from syphilis.
No fun.
After 10 years in prison, why are you suffering? Maybe he had syphilis before he went in the hospital. Who knows?
Yeah.
Plagued by health problems for the rest of his life, Capone died in 1947 at the age of 48. Crime doesn't pay.
I was about
Vice.
to say that.
How many times have people come to you as an advocate of virtue, as an advocate of living well, living the good life by following the virtues that lead to success, and said, well, some people don't believe in that stuff, and so being bad, engaging in vice, being evil, doesn't make them feel guilty, or doesn't give them anxiety, or doesn't make them sad, or doesn't lead to unhappiness. And the problem with that argument is that it doesn't work. Crime doesn't pay. And the reason isn't because we have mores that make you feel guilty, and if you don't have those mores, you won't feel guilty. The reason is that it's just counter to the facts of reality. You're trying to live in contradistinction to the way things really are. Now, how do I prove that? How do I show that? How do I make that point? Well, let me tell you.
Tell me.
We didn't get to the birthdays yet.
Oh, okay.
So, today is the birthday of Pino Palladino.
Who's this? Pino.
We recently celebrated the birthday of Tony Levin. Tony Levin is one of those bass players who you might not have known from being in a particular band. He played on everybody's albums. He was part of Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe, side project of Yes, my favorite band. He was part of Peter Gabriel's recordings. He played bass on songs like Sledgehammer. He was one of those bass players. He's a bass player's bass player. Pino Palladino is exactly that.
I see his credentials here.
Yes, like Tony Levin, he can play multiple styles. He plays both fretted and fretless basses, and expertly. I play both fretted and fretless basses. I play them badly. Pino Palladino is a bass player's bass player. His birthday is today. He turns 63 years old. Lately, he's been touring with The Who. I mean, who's going to replace John Entwistle when he passes away? Somebody of the caliber of Pino Palladino. His birthday today, happy birthday. What's the connection there? Well, yesterday, there were some great birthdays. There was the birthday of John Mayer.
Oh, really?
Outstanding guitar. Can you imagine being John Mayer? You make it as a pop icon. You then decide to start playing blues.
Right. And really well, too.
You put together a trio, like Jimi Hendrix style, just guitar, bass, drums. You've got this pop career. You don't need to do this, but he goes on to become one of the great blues players. And who does he get for his trio? Steve Jordan, this amazing record producer who's also one of the poppiest drummers you'd ever want to hear. Just great soul, great style, kind of like Hendrix had. And who do you use as your bass player in this trio of just amazing musicians? Pino Palladino. So there's your connection. John Mayer turned 44 years old yesterday. Happy birthday, John Mayer. 19 years younger than Pino. But it didn't matter. These guys were just three guys great at what they do. Also yesterday, October 16th, happy birthday to Angela Lansbury.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. What a wonderful lady. I love my Angela. You know, all those, I don't know, maybe a couple of years we actually went through the entire catalog of Murder, She Wrote. And we actually haven't finished the Murder, She Wrote movies yet, made-for-TV movies after the series ended.
We've got a couple movies left, but
Yeah.
you're right. We've seen every television episode, which
you know,
is no mean feat.
just-
There were, 15 seasons?
Something like that. But
Yeah.
she was just the best. And I just love being in her world. You know, she's so benevolent, but she's so solid, and she's so brave, and she's so intelligent. Just love her.
Love her. Love it. Born 1925. She's not only still alive, she's still working at 96 years old. Amazing, amazing, amazing. There was one birthday a day before that. We did the 17th today, the 16th yesterday, the 15th, the day before that, the birthday of Leonard Peikoff.
Yes.
Turned 88 years old. We have a lot of Ayn Rand fans who are also fans of our show. We know you're out there. If you did not see that Friday event, you can find it on YouTube. You don't need to search. It'll be in my show notes. The link is already in there. I'll post it right after the show. Great event. We were lucky to be part of the Ayn Rand Center UK's channel. We got invited to the Zoom call, so we got to see a little of the behind the scenes.
Yes, we were
as
the audience.
Well.
We were the audience.
We were the audience,
Leonard.
which you don't see on the video, but we were there watching the whole thing, including a little bit afterwards you all might have missed out on. But you've got to see the video. Great fun. And a few interesting lessons about virtue in there, including that virtue is not intrinsicist.
No.
And a peculiar answer to the old question, can an atheist and a religious person have a successful romantic relationship? I think we all know the answer to that one sort of intuitively, but maybe not explicitly. So, good video. Make sure that you watch that one. So lots of important birthdays. Oh, yes, and also it was my birthday yesterday, too.
Yes. Woohoo!
And as I say, if you want to wish me a happy birthday, go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Robert Nasir. Watch a few of my videos. Put a few likes out there. Get our numbers up. Our Facebook numbers are so cool. We get so many people watching on Facebook, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're on Facebook. The Facebook chat works really well. It's very cool, but I've got to get my YouTube numbers up. Until we get to 1,000 subscribers, which means I need you to share the show too, I can't get that super chat, and that's half the fun. In fact, the Leonard Peikoff episode, the Fireside chat on Friday, was the Ayn Rand Center UK's record-breaking super chat event as well. So a success in every way you could possibly want it to be. But what else? You notice I'm wearing something a little different here. Those of you watching on video, if you're listening on the podcast app, you can't see my punk rock shirt. But normally,
Pretty cool.
I have a uniform for this show. I have a kind of standard, always a black jacket, always the very cool hat, always a red t-shirt. But I needed to go a little different today because this is important. This is special. This is a holiday I didn't even know existed until recently.
Yeah.
In 1981, way back in June of 81, the hardcore punk band Minor Threat first released the song Straight Edge. And the term was soon adopted as a title for the movement to refrain from drugs, alcohol, and tobacco.
Oh, and promiscuous sex and religion as a crutch.
And this is Amy's version of punk rock.
Yeah.
Just like when we talk about the 80s, Amy sees the 80s through different eyes than some people do. Some people look at the 80s and they see Elle DeBarge and Debbie Gibson and all sorts of cute stuff, or they see the birth of rap, arguably started back in Rapture in 1978, but with Blondie. But the point is, Amy's 80s is the best version of the 80s.
It is.
And when Amy says that she was a punk rocker, you have to understand what that means. Birth of Straight Edge, Minor Threat, 1981. No drugs, no alcohol, no tobacco, no promiscuity. Straight edge.
Yeah. I'd like to say a little bit more about this, too.
Oh, we will.
Yeah.
You absolutely will. But why do we bring that up today? Straight edge was adopted, as the article I'm working from says, and it was a thing. What I didn't know, I don't even know if Amy knew this, is that throughout the 90s, it was sort of rediscovered and became bigger and bigger, and by 1999, it was a cultural thing again. In fact, National Edge Day was born. People had begun to live the straight edge lifestyle in the 1980s, but the movement gained traction in the 90s. National Edge Day was created in 1999 in Boston during an event called Edge Fest. And if you look on Wikipedia, I have a link in the show notes, it is now officially National Edge Day. And National Edge Day occurs on October 17th. So today is the day to be straight edge.
Yeah, why is it not called National Straight Edge Day instead of Edge Day?
Don't know.
That's weird.
The original event that started it was Edge Fest.
Oh, right. Got it.
So,
okay. But that was, I think this is sort of like a retroactive way of...
A retronym?
Yeah, something that isn't... And can I just say, can I butt in here?
Yes, please.
So
you are welcome to take over at this point, because this is your holiday.
Ian Mackay.
You know much more about this than I do.
Ian Mackay, so this is the late 70s. He was a teenager. And he and his band Minor Threat did their first show in, I think, 1980. And he was like 17 years old. All of them were underage. They had actually been in previous bands before, called the Teen Idols. And what happened was, as far as, because there's a particular symbol for straight edge, which is the X. And if you remember, if you've ever been to clubs recently or in the past or whatever, and you're underage, if you remember back then, if you went to a club and you were underage, you would show them your license. They would say, you're underage, and we're going to go ahead and just put a big black X on the back of your hand.
With a stamp or a permanent marker.
Yeah, permanent marker. And so then if you go up to the bar, the bartender is going to look at your hand and not serve you.
No, you can't have a beer.
But this is the thing, is that, a lot of kids back then wanted to attend these hardcore punk rock shows or these punk shows. And a lot of these clubs didn't exactly know how to deal with that. So Ian Mackay and some of his other friends went back to the Washington, D.C. area where they originally resided. And they basically told the club owners, this is all you need to do. So you can let us in. We're underage. We can see the shows. All I need to do is give us this X. So anyway.
The X was empowering.
Yeah, it was. And so Ian Mackay was actually a real punk rock hero of mine. And this is the thing, is that it's ironic that this is a National Edge Day today because he was writing lyrics for these hardcore punk rock songs, which are just great, based on his own personal beliefs. And he wasn't looking to create a movement. Actually, he was against that. He actually made it very clear that he wasn't there to prescribe this to anybody, that he didn't think it was appropriate for it to be some sort of like dogmatic movement. Unfortunately, a lot of bands after that, after Minor Threat, in the 80s and then the 90s and the 2000s even, they took that as some kind of, this is a collectivist identifier. But all Ian Mackay wanted to say is, all these punk rock bands out there, all these rock bands out there. They're all getting high and doing drugs and drinking to excess, and some of them are dying young. Holy heck! Look at the Ramones, for goodness sakes.
Look at the 27 Club. We all know the 27 Club. All the musicians who died
Janis
at age
Joplin
27,
and
Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain, and it's bizarre how many musicians died at 27.
Right. So there were a lot of punks out there who were just sick and tired and fed up with this and said, I want to be straight. I want to have my senses intact. I want to have my reason intact, my thinking mind intact, and I'm not going to go out and get blasted, get girls pregnant, and be, basically a complete douchebag. So I have standards. So anyway, so this actually became a little bit more, like I say, a bit more intrinsicist, a bit more dogmatic, and people got carried away with it. People started getting upset that other people weren't this way. And it actually became some parts of it, some groups within this subculture, you could call it, became violent. But most of them weren't. Actually, most of the straight edge folks were not.
Well, like a lot of rebellions, punk rock had some elements of blind rebellion, which is why I say when you hear Amy talk about being a punk rocker, what we admired, because I was too, to some extent, what we admired about the movement was the anti-authoritarianism, was the what's the word I'm looking for? Don't be like everybody else. Don't be a blind follower.
Yeah,
don't be a conformist.
Yeah.
And think for yourself.
Right.
Act independently.
And I got to say also is that, when I was a teenager studying philosophy on my own, because I didn't have any other place to go except for the library, and this is before objectivism, I really found it so empowering, the kind of moral certainty that was shown to me through the songs of Minor Threat and other songs too. Henry Rollins did some really amazing music for that. Just so many other bands that were just fantastic. And the whole idea of, it may seem absurd to some people that the whole idea of hardcore punk rock with its shouting and angry sounding music, fast-paced, double drums, all the good stuff, is actually pro-reason. But you can see that. You can see that kind of perspective coming out of that music. It was just loud and fast, and it was anti-violence, and it was just great. It was just the best. So anyway, that's part of my viewpoint of the 80s that a lot of people don't quite recognize. And I did call myself straight edge when I was a teenager. As a matter of fact, I was purposefully celibate for 2 years when I was a teenager.
This close to Halloween, that sounds like a horror story.
But, I wanted to make sure that I had my head on straight. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs. And I was also against, the kind of, religious teachings of, dogmatism and, using the religion as a crutch, as a feel-good type of thing that was that was antithetical to my own logical and reasonable thinking.
So when I found that October 17th is National Edge Day, to celebrate the straight edge movement, I could not resist talking about that. Of course, as people who study philosophy, well, we've gone far beyond that. We don't need blind rebellion. We don't need National Edge Day. We are consciously, explicitly pro-virtue and pro-value. To quote Ayn Rand, value is that which one acts to gain and or keep. Virtue is the action by which one gains and keeps it. Since a value is that which one acts to gain and or keep, and the amount of possible action is limited by the duration of one's lifespan, it is a part of one's life that one invests in everything one values. the years, months, days, or hours of thought, of interest, of action devoted to a value are the currency with which one pays for the enjoyment one receives from it. Unquote. Or as Benjamin Franklin said, "Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff life is made of." I can't help tying Edge Day and living by virtue and saying no to vices with the fact that our time is limited. It's Halloween, so of course I'm thinking, memento mori.
Yeah.
Remember that someday you are going to die. And that ties up the theme of probably the last 7 or 10 shows that we've done. Take your values seriously. Take your virtues seriously for your own sake, for your own life. And really, for this week, for today, that's what I've got. That's what I've got for you. If you feel the way I do, if you believe in virtue, if you believe that rationality and honesty and integrity and productiveness and pride and justice support your life, and that being an Al Capone or being lazy or being reckless is not in your own self-interest, I hope you have the same reaction I do when people say things like, "Oh, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas."
Ooh. Syphilis. Oh, wait, it's not staying there.
Yeah. You know, hey, we did an episode called Unconditional Love, and I've always told you I can find you a better interpretation for this kind of stuff. At its best, that get out of jail free card means you can afford to go a little overboard. Spend more than you usually would because you've already got the money in the bank. Drink a little more than you usually would because you've already arranged safe transportation and a room for the night. That's the best interpretation of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But when you see those television commercials and you see that sly, coy, winking, and it gives you the heebie-jeebies, it absolutely should.
And it's so very pro-Christian. You know, the whole idea of Christianity, we are all sinners. We can't help but sin because we're sinners. So, I guess we're just going to act naturally and sin, and then later on we're going to count on the church to give us indulgences and forgive us and call on to Jesus.
And worse than that, because the implication is also we're living for the weekends. That virtue means going to work every day.
Right.
Virtue means doing what you're supposed to do. Being virtuous, yeah, that might put the money in the bank, but it's no fun, and we live for our weekends, or we live for that weekend in Vegas. And that's no way to live. Your life is too short.
It's the scene in The Fountainhead when I think it was Howard Rourke was building Austin Heller's home, I think. And maybe he was talking to Mike, or maybe I forget, or Steven. And there was this carload of kids in this convertible being rowdy and laughing and just, and one was had a ukulele or something like that. And
it's just like this. Yeah, just holding a ukulele. And she's going, "Hey!" Just like that.
Hey! So, sorry for the loudness. So, but it was, that whole live for the weekend sort of thing, live paycheck to paycheck, and, don't think long term, don't have self-control. And let me give you a little bit of ideology. This is, if you go to Wikipedia and you go to Straight Edge.
Link is in the show notes.
And you go to the ideology section, it says, its philosophy was to rebel through self-control.
Rebel through self-control. I'm good with that. I'm okay with that.
With the ability to control one's actions Oh, a straight edge participant would be better suited to stand up against the mainstream. So in other words, if you've got your wits about you, you can actually reason better, you can have better arguments, you can stand up better. It says the first wave of straight edge did not impose rules on others. Rather, participants chose to follow the ways of self-control.
Yes.
And there's, that's the whole straight edge idea, again, was not to have a movement for it necessarily, but I guess I appreciate the National Edge Day sentiment to at least increase awareness. The fact that, there were punk rocks out there, including myself in the 80s, who were not interested in being what we called hippies. Hippies in the bad sense, not in the Robert Nasir sense. And Robert, actually, just as I have my own version of punk rock in the 80s, Robert has his own version of what it is to be a hippie.
Oh, yeah. When I talk about being a hippie, I don't mean a dirty hippie, a reckless hippie, an amoral hippie. No.
Yeah.
No, when I talk about peace and love, it's something else.
Yes.
We'll get into that another time, but there's some great comments in the chat.
Yeah.
There really are. Bonnie says, and she's got this in quotation marks, so obviously this is being sarcastic. Virtue means going without, giving up. And that kind of asceticism, it's one of the criticisms that objectivism has of Stoicism, is that it's ultimately an anti-value philosophy or a non-value philosophy. And so many people have that perspective that being virtuous means giving up. We did a whole episode called Virtue Without Scarecrows.
Yeah.
And this idea that virtue actually means achieving your values, that virtuousness doesn't mean a scarecrow waving a stick to chase away your pleasures, as is pointed out in one of Ayn Rand's articles. Narendra says, but we must be original when we sin. And that's funny because he knows I've made many jokes about original sin. Obviously, to say I don't believe in original sin would be an understatement. I've also said I'm older than sin. I have to be because I've invented a few of the good ones. We joke about sin because, come on, sin. Think about that. Now, in philosophy, we don't talk about sin. We talk about evil or wickedness
or vice. Yep.
Or just badness, because we're very quick, I think, in philosophy to designate somebody as evil when they are somebody who does things that are wrong. Sometimes people are just bad. Mm-hmm. In fact, most of the people you meet who aren't that good, well, first of all, most of the people you meet aren't that bad. But even the ones who are bad, most of them aren't much worse than bad. Mm-hmm. Now, it's easy to say, well, life is short. If you spend your time being bad, that's evil. But there is evil out there. There's real evil out there, and most of the badness or wickedness or vice that you see ain't evil.
Yeah.
Even though the principle behind it is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a fine line between evil and negligence, or evasion and negligence. Yes. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Well, Bonnie and Jim are having a good conversation in the...
Yeah, Jim had asked you a little bit more about talking about... sorry, I don't have it.
Just scroll through our chat here.
Yeah, the idea that definitely a story about two people who live in contradiction to reality in terms of, about Bonnie and Clyde. And could you repeat at some point what you said a few minutes ago about living in contradiction to reality?
Well, for me, the 2 points that I wanted to make. The one was just that fact that, again, when you read a story or you go to see a film where the bad guys are, and even if they're presented as bad guys, you're not supposed to like Bonnie and Clyde, even though you end up going along for their ride and feeling like that's exciting and interesting. But the point is, the film is 90 minutes long, or however long the particular movie is. 2001 lasts forever, Clockwork Orange, anything Kubrick. Mm-hmm. But you spend 85 of those minutes going along for that ride, and you sympathize or at least empathize with the characters. And it makes vice seem not just fun, but efficacious. These are the people who know the way the world really is, and they know how to get by in this world. And all of the innocent, all of the nice, all of the virtuous people they meet lose to Bonnie and Clyde, or to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And you know better. And the movie even makes the point at the very end, that 2.5 minutes at the end where they get all shot up. Or where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, jump off the cliff and they're, about to get It's the end of their story. You know they lose in the end, but you've just spent 85 minutes. That seems like, well, even if I have to lose at the end, maybe that exciting life, because Lord knows virtue isn't exciting. How are the virtuous people in these movies presented? Boring victims. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's one of the points I wanted to make. The other thing that Jim mentions, excuse me, was, I just lost the thread again, the thought.
Oh, is it here?
Just the fact that they're living in contradiction to reality.
Yeah.
So the other reason why the Bernie Madoffs of the world will tell you, and I believe them, that they were more miserable before they got caught than after they got caught. They were more miserable holding back the secret, knowing every morning when you look in the mirror, oh yeah, I'm the bad guy. I am the enemy of every person I will meet today. No matter how much, like a mafioso or an Al Capone, you've convinced yourself, well, that's the way of the world, and I'm just operating the way the world is. No matter how much you've convinced yourself of that, you know you are the enemy. You are the bad guy. You are the destroyer. You are the person who takes what people work for and takes it away from them, destroys it. And you cannot be happy that way. Even if you believe that's the way the world is and you are the right man for the world, even if you think, I'm the Cuffy Megs and I'm the one who really gets the way things are, that cannot lead to happiness because those values cannot be consistently achieved. And you have constantly got to be looking over your shoulder, not just for other people to catch you, but for the facts of reality to catch up with you. For the fact that you're not producing, you're not creating. You look at every building, every skyscraper that you see and realize, oh yeah, I'm not part of creating that, I'm part of destroying that. You look at every child who's born with a smile on his face and you realize, oh yeah, I'm not part of putting smiles on people's faces, I'm part of destroying the smiles and making people miserable. You look at every good thing in the world, every sunrise and every invention and every new medical breakthrough and every good thing that happens and realize, oh yeah, I'm the destroyer of that. Now you can't tell, well, you can tell me, and people have told me, well, if people really think that's the way the world is, then that kind of criminal life will make them happy. I just don't believe it. And again, not just because of people, not just because of psychology, not just because of culture, but the very facts of reality are against you every day when you live by the standards of vice and not virtue.
So Jim was taken aback by my use of the word douchebag, which I can use because I'm a lady. No, I'm kidding. Is
that obscene? I've actually seen a bag of douche.
I have too.
It's a thing.
It's made mainly of vinegar, and it basically gives women yeast infections. It's great. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so
it used to be a thing.
It used to be a thing.
I won't even get into the hygiene myths behind bags of douche.
Yeah, speaking of bags of douche, but there's a guy named Asatar Bear that Bonnie mentions in the YouTube chat. I just looked up his horrible quote on Twitter of this year in June. He says, "My new friends, I defend Stalin because of the results achieved by Soviet socialism for the masses of ordinary working people, including a massive increase in life expectancy, dramatic increases in infant mortality, and improved health outcomes across the board due to massive investments in public health at all levels."
Okay.
And literacy and all that stuff. That's interesting.
That's a worse obscenity than saying the word douchebag.
Yeah. So. For those people who survived the forced famines. I mean, what a douchebag.
If you weren't one of the 80 million people who died,
you actually...
Then you, survived?
Right. If you didn't die as an infant, then you had really excellent infant mortality if you lived to be an adult. Isn't that nice?
You lived to be a starving adult instead of being a starving infant. We had that this week. I was considering putting it in the, what are we watching this week? And decided Leonard Peikoff had to be at the top of that list. But Yaron Brook had a very good debate with a very strange person, a very famous professor of economics, Richard Wolff, earlier this week. He's posted it. If you go to the Yarn Brook Show, either his website or the YouTube channel, you can watch it. And I've commented extensively on it on Facebook, on the Yarn Brook Show's Facebook page. Yarn Brook debated Richard Wolff on capitalism versus socialism, and one of the strange things that Richard Wolff said, and Bonnie points out that Yarn will not debate this man again because of what he said.
Yeah.
He claimed that in China, the Chinese communist policies actually improved the lives of the Chinese. The claim was they were already starving after the 1920s anyway, and that what Mao did in 1949 was an improvement for the Chinese people.
Wow.
How many millions can die and still call it an improvement over what came before it? Well,
Yeah.
apparently Richard Wolff thinks that that is the case. I would have wanted to know more. I would have wanted to tell me, Professor Wolff, what resource can I look at that will make that claim? Because on the face of it, that's a far worse obscenity than saying the word douche and the word bag.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, Richard Wolff is obviously an evil douchebag. I can't even. I always wondered what that expression "I can't even" means, but now I know.
In other
I
words,
can't
it
even think of
means-
the next thing to say.
It means there are no words.
There are no words
Yeah.
for that level of viciousness. The
Yeah.
idea that Chairman Mao
Ugh.
improved things for Chinese peasantry.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
I know they believe it. I know they believe that if there was freedom, if there was capitalism, that capitalism would have left all sorts of people behind, and you would have had Chinese ghettos and people starving to death just because they didn't have access to capital. Because that's what they say about America. Anybody who has even read the Wikipedia article, because I haven't read the book myself, on the Black Book of Communism, anybody who just looks at the credible numbers of what communism did, and not just in Soviet Russia and communist China, but in Cambodia, it's unfathomable that somebody with Richard Wolff's credentials can get away with making a statement like that. So I wonder how he supports that. But I can't imagine that he supports it in any way that would make Yarn Brook change his mind about ever debating the man again, because that's just evil.
Well, let's change the subject.
And on that happy note...
So Jim actually just, he tooted the horn before I did, because I was going to mention a really excellent example of a movie of seeing the ways of evil in action, and but in a good way. In the movie Double Indemnity with Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. Oh, such an excellent movie, and y'all should watch it. And he mentions also Kubrick's The Killing.
I've not seen it.
Haven't seen it. He says they're excellent film noirs that take the viewer on a ride, but in the end show us that criminals pay a huge price for their crimes in one way or another. On a side note, The Killing demonstrates the crime-stopping abilities of poodles.
Of poodles.
Okay.
Crime-stopping poodles. I guess we will have to look into
We'll
that.
just have to look into this. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, big fans of Double Indemnity. And yes, you don't want to go through what the Fred McMurray character goes through in that film. At the end of the film, you're like, I don't want anything like that. And yet, at the same time, there is that exciting element of, living on the edge, living the edgy life. And I've said you should definitely push boundaries. It's one of the things I have against the current cultural movements, against making everything okay. It started with the sex positivity movement. We mentioned Lacey Green recently. My problem with the sex positivity movement is if you say that no matter what you do, as long as nobody gets hurt, which is a loose formulation that has almost no definition, but no matter what you do, it's all good. It's all okay. It's all normal. If nothing is beyond normal, if nothing is over the edge, there is no edge, nothing is edgy. Everything is vanilla.
And there's no National Edge Day.
And nothing is exciting.
Okay.
Nothing is interesting.
Yeah.
So Yes,
Scott
there
has
need to be edges. There need to be, because in reality there are. There are things you can do that violate nobody else's rights that will hurt you and hurt you bad. There are edges. There are boundaries. There are borders. Don't fight against those.
Right, and don't say, well, everything is just loosey-goosey and subjective and
how dare
and
you
fuzzy.
judge me?
Yeah, let's not actually identify things because that hurts my feelings.
Yeah, well,
that's not quite right.
bring on the judgment.
So Scott says, if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't gonna make it with anyone anyhow.
That's right. And Scott may know I already put that quote on the Yaron Brook Show's conversation on the topic. Who could resist? Even John Lennon, with that name, Lennon. But even John Lennon understood that much. And somehow Professor Richard Wolff is still carrying pictures of Chairman Mao. And hopefully he ain't going to make it with anybody anyhow. So we're running a little longer than expected. I had such a short message this week.
Yeah.
You know, live virtuously, but also have an edge. So my homework for this week, because I actually have homework for this week. No, actually I don't. My homework is a carryover from last week. And I'm going to invite you to join me on it. I said last week when we talked about the formative power of music, what music did for you when you were young, what philosophic lessons you took from it, that I would post my completely amateur and horrible music videos, but I've only posted one of them. Speaking of John Lennon, I did do my little John Lennon tribute. Since his birthday was last week, I posted a piano. Why am I playing piano? I'm a guitar player. But I posted a piano rendition of Strawberry Fields Forever.
Yeah, very nice.
Well, thank you. And I have 4 more of those to do. So I will be posting, and that's my homework for the week, is my homework from last week. What I'd love for it to happen is I would love for you, and I mean you, I'm pointing at the camera, so that means each and every one of you, I would love, and Amy too, to join me this week and do one of your own. Sing something.
All right.
Sing it a cappella, or sing it to karaoke, or sing it to the original recording, or if you play an instrument, play an instrument. Or if you can do both, sing and play it, whatever it is. Put some music out there.
Yeah, you know what? You can also, if you'd like to, you can go to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook page and post it there. And you
Post
can even
it there.
Put,
God, I would love to see that. So one person already did.
Oh, yeah.
Narendra already posted. He sang a song.
That's nice.
And it's great because Narendra is in India. So he sang it in English and then he sang it in Hindi.
Excellent.
And posted both of them in one video. Very cool.
What song was it?
I don't remember the song title, but it was translated as Life.
Okay.
I don't remember the Hindi title. It was originally Hindi.
That's so
And
cool.
then he did his own translation to English. If everybody would do that, we could flood the wall with completely amateur but magnificent musical recordings.
Marilyn says, "Oh hell no." Well, maybe
we'll have to wait till we get her in town. We'll do GlowCon karaoke night or talent show night, and we'll get her.
You could put on your piece of favorite classical music, and then you could read a short poem.
Anything.
There you go.
Anything is something, and something is anything or something. So anyway, my homework for the week, my carryover music from last week. Please join me. My Post-it note for the week just says, what does it say? What happens in Vegas happened. And that's my version of the buck stops here. Forget that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Forget that get out of jail free card. I want whatever I do to matter. Because it does. I can't escape that fact. It's one of the reasons why I don't do drugs, speaking of straight edge. Mm-hmm. And I don't drink much. Right. I very rarely drink, and I very, very rarely drink to excess. Although, if you're going to drink to excess. But I always say I like to be there when I'm having a good time.
Right.
And I like to remember when I've had a good time.
I've been known to drink a little bit too much during Halloween parties, but that's about it.
That's about it. That's about it. And like we talked about before, you have made all the arrangements in advance to make sure you've paid for that. Whatever's got to be paid for that. So, yes, I'm a big fan of accountability. Because accountability isn't for anybody's sake but your own. In the end. Right. And it's all for you.
It is. It's all for you. It's all for living rationally and basically.
They say virtue is its own reward, but it's not. Virtue is your reward.
Yes. And then you can have a happy life and you can live in, you can have a long-term outlook in your life and actually plan for your fun, for your success, for your hard work, and it's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
So have fun on the edge, push your boundaries, do crazy stuff, but know in advance what you're doing. Be mindful, be intentional. Can you be rational and outrageous?
I can.
The short answer is yes. The long answer is I want you to prove it to me. Tell your stories in the chat, online, post your videos, be a part of it. God knows, and he ain't telling, that I'm going to do that this week, and you will see my terrible music videos and anything else that I can think to post. And that, on National Edge Day, you straight edge people, is what I've got. It's all I've got. And I'm going to wrap up by saying this important thing. Show notes will be posted within 5 to 10 minutes after the show, with links to all of the exciting and interesting things we've talked about. All of the birthdays, National Edge Day, Al Capone in jail being miserable because that's what happens when you suck. God. That might not have been the right way to put that.
What?
If you have questions or comments, and especially if you have show suggestions, topics you would like us to cover, things you would like us to research for you, Bonnie, I'm still working on that one. Mm-hmm. Post them in the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group. Where can you find that link? Go to robertnasir.com and you will find not only that link, but you will find a link to our Patreon and PayPal pages. Thank you to those of you who are on our Patreon. We're at record levels. Okay, we still need to grow it because it's not super big, but we are higher than ever before, and I appreciate it. My gratitude goes out to those of you who are already patrons of the show. Anybody else who's up for joining it, we will love and appreciate you more than you can imagine. And thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Wow, we went long. I didn't expect to go long this week, but I'm going to keep it real short next week. I promise it'll be super concise. It'll be 5 minutes long.
Plus
okay,
another
maybe
5.
not. Maybe
Plus another
not.
5. But thank you, everybody. It was lovely to see you all. And oh, by the way, I just want to say thank you to those people who have reached out to me about our, my reminder this week that life is finite with regard to my brother Kenny. So
yes. We've
I
had
really
a couple of lawsuits
that.
in our circle, including Amy's late brother.
Yeah.
He,
so thank you.
Speaking of punk rock, he wasn't a punk rocker. He was a heavy metal guy.
Yeah.
But he lived exactly the way he wanted to live. He had the tattoo to show it. His Iron Maiden tattoo. I won't go into the details, but this is a man who lived his values. Whatever his vices and virtues, he lived his values.
Yes, he did.
And thank you so much to everybody who's reached out about that. It is the sympathy and the thoughts are very much appreciated.
Yes. Thank you.
And with that said, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. As always, we wish you success, the kind of success that living the virtuous life, the edgy life, the fun life, but not the stupid and vicious life, the kind of success that we know that you are striving to achieve along with us. We are on the same planet, we are on the same journey, we are on the same ride, and we appreciate having you here. We do wish you life on the edge. Do the straight edge, but be edgy. You can do both. In fact, I don't really think you can live an exciting and edgy life without virtue. Otherwise, that stuff will kill you like Bonnie and Clyde. And as always, this week, and with 2 weeks until Halloween, as always, we wish you very spooky, very chilling, very creepy love.